Alright, so we're back once again, and today we're going to be talking about submarines. Now, I was having a nice, lovely, relaxing break away from World of Warships when I realised, or seen, that they were having another submarine test, the 5th one. And, well, I couldn't really help myself, so I thought, why not download the TCT client, hop into a game, and have a look at them for the 5th time to see if they've actually somehow managed to balance them. And well, this is my live second game right now. I played one before, but for some reason the replay system doesn't seem to be working at the minute, so at least on the TCS server, or TCT server, which is the one the submarines are on. And so, well, there's a couple of things I want to talk about in regards to submarines. And well, as you can see right now, the first thing I want to touch on is basically the fact that, well, previously they didn't feel blatantly overpowered. Well, when I say blatantly overpowered, let me just start from the start. Like the last test, submarines have ways to be countered effectively. They have depth charges, they have things that can actually counteract them. And well, with the last test, you couldn't really counter them with battleships. Battleships basically had no defensive capability against submarines. They didn't have depth charges, they didn't have the things that destroyers had. But with this update, and from playing the Ismail at tier 6, which is the tier that the submarines are at for this test, they have added depth charges. Oh, I say depth charges, it's more like a plane squadron into the game. And it's just basically a number 4 consumable right here that you can activate, and then you control a squadron effectively, and you basically can drop an area with depth charges. They land in a straight line, but where the line actually is, or where it'll actually show up, is a bit iffy. Now, with that being said, it's good that they've actually added some defensive capability to battleships. But at the same time, because we're going to dive here, just not to get destroyed. But at the same time, it's actually a little bit clunky how this is actually enacted, because, well, that's ridiculous. Anyways, it's a little bit clunky how it's enacted because, well, submarines have a very easy time, shall we say, actually damaging battleships, even with this adoption of an ASW squadron. So as a result, the limited amount of damage you can do, I don't think I can hit this guy from here, can I? The limited amount of damage you can do to a submarine is actually minimized. I think I might be turning the wrong way. Anyways, the amount of damage you can do to a submarine is pretty minimal, even with that squadron. Whereas the submarine can just YOLO charge you, land at 2 ticks. Like I did right there, and basically kill you. Whereas it feels more like a repeat of the carrier situation in terms of with respect to battleships. That being said, though, there is a weird thing where some ships seem to not have actual anti-submarine depth charges. I've played Vasteras tier 6 again, and it didn't have any defensive capability, which was a bit troubling. Obviously this could just be an oversight or something. Maybe they will include them in all destroyers, but interesting if they're going to go with the line of torpedo boats not having any capability to defend themselves. Well, at least some torpedo boats. But with that being said, there's a couple of other things I want to touch on too. Obviously the targeting ping, that entire system has been effectively overhauled, and it's gone, well, at least for me, it feels a lot easier to actually damage ships nowadays. I say nowadays, in this test at least, it feels a hell of a lot easier to actually, you know, lock on to ships. Because let's be frank, hitting a ship isn't all that difficult. Especially from like 8 or 9 kilometers. You're pretty much going to be guaranteed to get 2 pings in the same area of the ship, pretty consistently. I think the main concern with this is that it becomes overwhelming in the hands of a really good player, like severely overwhelming. Because again, you just seen from earlier, I had no problem hitting, you know, the same part of a ship several times over, and I am in no way a good player of this game. But anyways, with that being said, how the actual pinging system works is that you ping the enemy ship once. That allows your torpedoes to get a little bit of tracking on them, and they'll kind of maneuver their way slowly into their direction, a bit like the last system. And then if you ping the same area of the enemy ship again, it'll add a little bit more guidance, so they'll swing a little bit more in the enemy ship's direction. But most importantly is that they'll absolutely avoid the enemy ship's torpedo belt protection, which is huge. This is the second game I've played of a submarine, and well, the first one I dealt about, I think 50-60k, and I only really had an interaction with one other enemy battleship. That's insane amount of damage. And again, harping back to my last point, if this ship, are they gonna hit? Oh, lucky boy. But if they hit, if a decent player gets in control of a submarine, I can see very easily very, very potent games in the range of 100k easily. And this is a tier 6, remember, where those kind of games are fairly rare. That being said though, there's probably one or two other things. The perspective is still a little bit jaunting, it's still fairly low down, and especially switching between going underwater and going above water, the perspective changes so much that it's still really, really clunky. And to tie into this, actually pinging enemy ships on the surface isn't terrible from underwater. But pinging submarines in the, you know, what am I doing? And the submarine to submarine interaction is really, really awkward. It's still very clunky, and I still think it needs a little bit more work to make it truly polished. But frankly, I still think you're gonna have a really hard time balancing these things, shall we say. They're definitely not going to be simple. But again, for this test, I think it's going in the right direction. The pinging mechanics makes a lot more sense, even though it is going to be significantly easier to actually ping enemy ships. But I think it's a lot more fluid, a lot more conducive. And are they going to hit? Nice. And a lot more conducive to, you know, just a consistent sense of gameplay. Now that being said, you can't have overpowered things in the game, so it's going to be interesting to see how they balance that out. But I think overall, I'm a lot more impressed with this iteration of submarines than I am with the previous one. And again, that doesn't say much, but maybe this will help illustrate my point in terms of clunkiness. Like, you can see the perspective here. Like, I'm sending out sonar pings, and it's very difficult to gauge where the enemy submarine is. Just from a 3D perspective, really, really awkward. But again, this is something that can be worked on. You can add more. I know the art department's actually pretty decent, so again, this can be altered, messed around with, and ultimately, I don't think it's all that much of an issue. Am I gonna ram this guy? Almost. But with that being said, the game's just about to end, and that's pretty much my summary for submarines. I don't want to focus too much on them because again, I don't think I'm uniquely qualified to actually give an update or a completely updated view. But for what it's worth, like I almost hit me with his, and well, until next time, if you haven't tried out submarines, try them out. But if you don't want to try out submarines, don't. And well, I'll see you all in the next one.